I'm continuing my preview of the Candidates Tournament that takes place in Toronto from the 4th of April to the 22nd of April. 8 players, double round robin, battling it out. It's going to be absolutely fascinating, and I'm going through each of the 8 players. This time it's the turn of Hikaru Nakamura. Live rating 2789. Currently standing at number 3 in the world. He's aged 36. He qualified for the candidates by coming second in the FIDE Grand Swiss tournament that took place in the Isle of Man at end of October, beginning of November. And I was struck there by his pragmatism. He was very economical. He scored 5 wins and 6 draws. He knew when to push, when to go for a win. He knew when to just rein it in. So technically he was very, very good, squeezing out wins in endgames. And, when he needed to just hang back and hold a draw, he could do that. So technically he was excellent. Now, these days, Hikaru is mainly known as a streamer. He plays online Blitz and Rapid all the time and makes a very good living out of that. And he's kind of, said that he's sort of turned his back on classical chess. He doesn't need to earn a living by playing on the tournament circuit anymore. But I think this is very clever psychology. It takes the pressure off him. Or it takes it off himself anyway. But actually what's interesting is, if you look back over the past year, he's played a lot of classical tournaments. So let's just have a look. He played in the American Cup in March 2023. He played in Norway Chess, that was May-June 2023. He played the FIDE World Cup, August 2023. The Qatar Open, October 2023. And as we've just seen, he played in the FIDE Grand Swiss tournament, end of October, beginning of November 2023. Now, perhaps for a sort of modern day professional, that's not a particularly hectic schedule, but I don't know, it's busy enough. So it's quite enough to keep him in practice in classical chess. So he's being clever. He's taken the pressure off himself. In the 2022 candidates, Nakamura came pretty close to qualifying. He lost in the final round against Ding. And I think he knows that this time he's 36 years old and the kids, they're getting better and better. This might be his best chance of qualifying for the world title match. So yeah, in 2022 he came quite close. He played in 2016 in Moscow in the candidates there, and he had a really poor start and was basically out of contention. But it seems to me that he's a lot maturer in his play and as a person, obviously, than he was in previous candidates tournaments. And I'd like to have a look at one of the crucial games he played from the Isle of Man. And it's against his rival in the States, their best frenemies, Fabiano Caruana, who of course is playing in the candidates as well. So this was in the penultimate round in the Isle of Man, a really crucial game. Round 10, Nakamura with white. And Caruana plays his favourite, Petrov. And Nakamura's opening choice, I think, is very, very clever. Instead of going into one of the main lines in the Petrov, which Caruana would know very well, he plays really pragmatically. Knight c3. So we have 4 knights, and now we have 4 knights Scotch on the board. So this is an ancient opening variation, going right back into the 19th century. It doesn't have a particularly fearsome reputation for white. It's been pretty well worked out. So is this a surprising choice? Well, let's just roll on a little bit and see what happens. So Caruana played it in the trendy modern way. Instead of recapturing straight away, he just castled. He's hoping that white will take here, and then bishop g4, and it gets tricky. But Nakamura didn't want anything to do with that. He just castled. And after c takes d5, we're back in the absolutely standard position. As I said, theoretically, really white doesn't have very much at all in this position. Why? Because black occupies the centre with that pawn. It stands to reason. Why should black be worse in this position? Having said that, because white has such freedom with his pieces, it's very hard to imagine that white can be worse here. And white uses that freedom just to create a few potential difficulties. So h3 looks very strange. I think you all know what I think about these little pawn moves at the side of the board, but actually it makes a lot of sense because the queen wants to come to f3, and h3 just prevents bishop g4. So it secures the position of the queen here, which is an excellent square, it has to be said. And here, standard moves, rook b8, c6. Caruana played c5, which looks quite menacing. This bishop might be pushed away from the diagonal, but rook d1. So black has to watch out for the pins here. And Caruana took. It's a slightly unusual variation. c5, I just wonder how well prepared Caruana was for this one. I mean, I'm sure he had looked at this at home, but maybe not so thoroughly. You know, it is a bit of a sideline. But it seems to me that Nakamura was extremely well prepared. He usually is. Queen a5. Well, you can't take this immediately. There's a discovered attack, but soon. Bishop g5 hits the knight, which moved into the middle, and that had to be exchanged off. Now, if white wants to draw here, you can just take, and there's not a lot going on there. But clearly Nakamura wanted more. And although the pawn structure doesn't look at all bad for black, I mean, you could say that, you know, black's structure is, on the surface of it, healthier than white's, you know, with these double pawns here. Actually, there are a few issues for black here. And I wonder if Caruana in his preparation underestimated these issues. So you can see straight away that there's some kind of attack with either bishop f6 or bishop h6 threatened. So that's why the king stepped in the corner. I mean, this has been seen before. I am pretty sure that Nakamura knew all this. And here he found a new move. Perhaps he'd prepared it. I don't know. a4. So this kind of locks the queen out of the game a little bit. It certainly prevents any kind of captures here. I mean, that wouldn't be possible in any case at the moment because of the pin, but you know, if rooks are traded or this rook wants to move, it just sort of shuts the queen out a little bit. It's a good move. Rook e8. With the bishop on g5, it's actually a little bit problematic for black. Black can't challenge the rook on the d file. Not at the moment, so rook d6 came. And I can understand why Caruana played this next move. He played h6. Well, we'll see the downsides to this in a second. But if you don't play h6, well, what do? Have a look at this move. What about bishop c4? Which looks quite nice. You know, the bishop is stationed here. The rook might come up to e6 to exchange off. But there's some amazing tactics here. So forgive me, I'm just going to make a little digression here. Rook h6, what about that? Beautiful move. So obviously if that's taken, then that's checkmate. And if rook e6, well, that looks sensible to exchange off the rook. But now the queen comes in. Now, again, this king has to contend with potential pins here. That's rather nasty. So king g8. Now watch this, bishop e3, attacking the pawn. Okay, black defends with rook c8, it looks reasonable. But now bishop d4 is a winning move. What a beautiful way to exploit that pin. So mate threatened, and obviously f6 leaves that bishop hanging. So there is more to this position than meets the eye, and I can understand why Caruana wanted to push that bishop away. But watch what happens. Bishop f4. This is getting tricky now. Here's another tricky idea. Okay, what about rook d8? Well, after bishop e5, f6, and now there's a tactic, and bishop c7. Really tricky. So bishop f4, rook e7 played. Queen e3. Uh-oh. Well, this doesn't look subtle, does it? I mean, already there could be a threat just to play rook c6 and take that pawn. You can see with this pawn on e4, all these dart squares are rather weak, and the queen and the bishop are just sort of, and the rook are running round, having a great time here. Rook c8 played, and bishop takes pawn. It's actually not that complicated. Let's just see what happens if the bishop is taken. So actually Caruana played f6 here, but let's have a look at this. Pawn takes. Okay, easy first moves. Okay, that's another forcing move. That's another forcing move. Mate threatened. Therefore rook e8. Okay, let's give a check here. Now if king g8, then rook e1, not too difficult. The rook swings across and will win. Okay, what about king e7? Forced mate here. And the king is just checked across the board. The rook joins in, and hallelujah, checkmate. So wow, it happens very quickly, very easy. That's all forced. Okay, so that's why Caruana played f6, but obviously this is not looking good. Not for black. White has broken through, and the king's looking shaky. And yes, the queen is in Siberia. This is why this all works for white, because that queen is so far offside. And I think this is obviously Caruana underestimated the problems with this position when he went in for it right from the beginning. So queen takes e4, hits the bishop. Queen takes c3, hits the rook, so rook d1. White's forces joining up beautifully now. And rook d8. If pawn takes, then that's pretty simple. Starts to hit things here. So bishop g8, queen h4. It's pretty nasty. And Nakamura wrapped up very well. Notice that pawn is actually coming in handy, giving the king a flight square. I mean, Fabiano is struggling manfully, but I'm afraid there really isn't any way out of this one. Okay, he dives into an endgame, but it certainly won't save him. White is just too active with the rook on the 7th. And the opposite colour bishops actually mean that it's impossible to quell White's attacks successfully here. And Nakamura actually played it very simply. He doesn't need... I mean, if you want to keep the rooks on, I guess you can. But actually, he realises... Whoops, I beg your pardon. He realises that he can just exchange and go into a technically winning endgame. Let's just see how this worked out. g4. And the king came up. And the bishop came back. And here Caruana had had enough. So yeah, a very good example of actually how Nakamura's technique is excellent. You know, there are no complications here at all. How? Why? Why did Caruana resign? Well, basically, these pawns are going to shunt up the board in combination with the king and the bishop. And there'll be a check. You put the pawns on light squares and they're complemented by the bishop. So eventually the king will have to fall back to g8. The king will follow up the pawns, will go to g5, and yeah, they'll go through basically. I mean, the only thing that black can do is give up the bishop, but obviously the pawns drop. That's an easy win for white. Very impressive game by Nakamura, and I think a really clever opening choice, because in this kind of position, I don't think white can ever lose. You know, if you make normal moves, black is the one that is fighting for equality and usually gets there, but the pressure is on black. Very clever from Nakamura. So does he have a chance? Absolutely he has a chance of winning the candidates, as do many others. I don't think he's one of the favourites. I think he might be just a bit too old, but I certainly wouldn't discount his chances. But you'll soon find out who I think the favourites are. There we go. Keep tuned, stay tuned. More previews coming your way soon. Thanks for watching.